Hey, welcome to episode 154 of This Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
The bad guy is back. Happy New Year.
And I'm still TK.
You know, why did we let him go second?
It's fine. I have no problem with that.
He's the stuffing in the Oreo.
He really wants to go first, but it's hard for him to see exactly when we're live. So
right. No one allows me to do anything. I'm like Michael Jordan. You can't stop me. You can only hope to contain.
He is back, by the way. He is back. He was not lying, folks.
Oh, man. So, new show format.
I'm definitely not like LeBron because I want the ball at the last second.
No, it's not. It's not a new format at all, Jason.
So I took the banner down. We're going to try that again. See, this is one of the things of having a live show, and this is why I'm so excited to try and cut this up and repost it, because now I can actually edit it. So, like, I used to do that show with the chair of the department at Cal Poly, and we went down to, like, it really was a professional soundstage.
Oh, yeah.
And you had teleprompters. Yeah. That was, oh, man, I can't remember the name of the show now. Cyberfed. And, man, we could do as many takes as we wanted. We could get it perfect, our timing. Dude, this is a live stream. There ain't no takes. And there ain't no take backs.
It's just like in the world. No such thing as safe words.
See, that's right. That's right, man. You know, and listen, we've done 100. This is the 154th episode. And I think we've done a good job of not getting ourselves in a lot of trouble.
Well, especially me.
Well, it's not like anybody on this show is shy. You know what I mean?
No, it's not about being shy.
Well, actually, it's the mechanism of self-regulation, right? That's really where we're at.
This is why morning shows are the best, man, because we all drink coffee and not whiskey in the morning.
Well,
I knew Dan was going to say that. I was like, here he comes.
Well,
now you mentioned it.
All right, let's try this again. In our new format, I would like to start with This Week in Tech. And I was reading this morning. This isn't so much a question, more of like, I don't know why it surprises me, but it surprises me. One of the drive manufacturers announced that in 2020, they're releasing 10 and 20, no 15, right? Terabyte hard disks. That's kind of crazy. 20 terabytes. To put that in perspective.
It'll be some ridiculously low price compared to what 300 gigs was 12 years ago, right? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, like I'm in the market for an external drive. I haven't had one in a long time, but especially with wanting to cut up video and do some things. And my Cyber Lab is air gapped. So, you know, I have a need for a portable disk. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, 4 terabytes for like $80.
Yeah.
Now it's a mechanical, it's not a solid state, but solid state's only like 150. So let's say double the price of a mechanical for like multiple terabytes. And now what? They're going to have 20 terabyte drives, dude. So put that in perspective. I just paid like $30K for an 80 terabyte raw storage array for my lab. And now single disks are going to be 20 terabyte. I mean, even if they're $500, that's massive amounts of storage. I don't know what to think about that. I mean, what do you think's driving? Okay, so here's the question part. So what I started to wonder about is what is driving that? So like what drives PC sales is gaming, right? New games come out, they have higher requirements. You need a new GPU, faster CPU. So that kind of drives that consumer market for PCs. What drives hard disk size?
Well, my guess is, overall, business storage where people with pictures, things like that. But what I'm curious is, we've got this 20 terabyte drive, but what is the speed still the same, or did you degrade speed in order to get capacity?
As far as I know, the speeds have stayed the same forever, man. 5400, 7200, and 10K.
The 20 terabytes? Or
what's that?
Was it solid state or spinning disk? Or
mechanical?
Mechanical. That's why. So they haven't. So essentially, speed has been degraded in order to get capacity.
Why do you say speed's been degraded, though? The plotter's still spinning at the same rate.
Well, he means opposed to solid state, right?
Solid state is now the new norm, and speed is faster than a spinning disk. So,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So while we've got so that means the next generation, maybe in another 18 months, 3 years, we'll see speed come back up.
Right, but you're comparing solid state to mechanical.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I don't know of a solid state over what 2-4 terabyte.
I can't remember what I was putting in the sand at the last place, but they got pretty high. I just don't remember. I'd have to look.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I don't recall. But
I mean, I know I've never seen a 10 or a 12 terabyte SSD. Those are all mechanical drives.
Yeah.
So if you go shop on Amazon right now and you look at all the external drives, if you want over 4 terabytes, they're all mechanical spinning.
Yeah,
if you want 1 or 2, or obviously, see, this is the crazy thing too. You can't buy a mechanical under 1 terabyte, 500 gig. It's impossible. You can't get them.
Well, let's go this. When I was at BlackBerry, we did a lot of stuff on thumb drives, and we wanted at the time, and this is before we virtualized everything, we wanted the highest write speed you could get. And so for 8 gigabytes, and this is 10 years ago, 9 years ago, for 8 gigabytes at the time, we were paying $120 to get that write speed. Then we virtualized everything, and about the same time, that storage, the cost per kilobyte of storage fell through the floor. I mean, I remember we had 300 gigs of music, and we used that music to populate on some drives and stuff like that. And some of the guys would come in and say, "Hey, that's a lot of music. Can we copy that?" And they're like, "Yeah, just bring a drive in and we'll do it for you." These guys were paying $300 for a 300 gig drive, so you were talking $1 a gig on a spinner. And I got not so long ago. It's about the size of the dimensions of a credit card and about that thick. It's 500 gigs and it was like $40, SanDisk, solid state.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, that's done a lot of that storage. The cost per kilobyte of storage dropping off. It really facilitated the smartphone market. All this, and now when you talk about 20 terabytes, we generate. I can't remember the raw number, but it's a massive amount of terabytes every minute with even just uploaded YouTube videos, right? Yeah. And so everybody's, storage is nothing because it all goes out in the cloud. And I think anything like that now it's becoming a work thing, right? Because everybody like, where's all my data? Well, it's up in this cloud right here, right? And you have confidence in Apple or Google or whomever that they're going to be moderately good stewards. I think people have high confidence that they're not going to lose your information, right? I think that's if you look at different gradients, confidence in them keeping your information is huge, which that always drove why people got external drives, because what happens if my computer crashes? What happens if all these other things happen, right? So now their confidence is really high, but people are still trepidatious from a privacy perspective, right? They think it's secure. You have to have trust that those folks are not looking at it more than anything else, right? That's especially with Google, because that's what I hear all the time. People are like, "Oh man, Gmail, they're going through all my stuff." Well, it's a free service you're getting, right? So what level of that? I think that's pretty cool, though.
Well, what's interesting to me too, what I was thinking about along these lines is that over even recent history, let's say the last decade, right? Let alone 2 decades, there have been things that we weren't able to do because our computers weren't fast enough, let's say, right? They didn't have enough CPU, enough memory, whatever, right? There were operations we couldn't do that now we can do because we've sufficiently advanced. Past like the beginning of like floppy disk, I can't remember the last time I thought about, well, shit, do I have enough storage to do this? Like, it's so disposable now and it's so cheap, right? And it's on-demand cloud access. So, that's what's the neat thing about cloud is, so I need more storage. Well, I don't have to go buy a disk, install it, format it, transfer things over. I just pay a higher surcharge per month.
Right.
Done.
Yeah. So it looks like with a quick look at Dell, their solid state, it's each with their array. One of the like decent sized ones is 924 terabytes, 60 bay. So it's about 5 terabyte drive per solid state.
Yeah.
It looks like it's 5 if I'm doing a quick look. So
yeah, because I have one of the 3U disk arrays from Dell, and to keep the cost down, but to get high capacity, I got mechanicals. Yeah. But they're the small laptop size, like SAS drives.
Yeah, but what you start looking at, especially when you're in the sand, is what are the read write speeds, the IOPS total across the entire array. So
Right.
so if you're looking at trying to do live stream off of something like that, then solid state is more important than if it's file storage. If it's generic file storage, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, especially like for consumer grade, or like what you're wanting to do. If you're getting picky about the write speed, it's like that's a first world problem.
Well, kids will come out and they'll say, "But I need this for this game," and I'm like, you realize that the overall point of contention is still the overall bus speed on the PC. It doesn't even get up to a gig being able to push out. When you start combining the video, the network, it's not even a gig of throughput. So I'm going that your solid state did nothing.
Well, that's what that's what I've always loved, man. Probably like you too. When people would say, "But the network's so slow, dude. You can't saturate it. The buffer on your disk isn't big enough. Shut up. Be quiet. Be quiet." I'm not saying there's not something wrong with the network, but throughput is not speed.
No, it's you can.
It's the size of the package I can put into the pipe per second.
So back at XM Radio, these guys believed that they were getting. So this was when 8023 AD first came out. So that's where you could take multiple gigabit Ethernet and regular Ethernet and combine them to get essentially the
double
speed, right? So they were putting in 4 network cards and binding 2 gigabit on both sides. And I'm going, why did you do that? You can only get 150 from the motherboard pushing out. You could have just stayed with the 100 regular 100 base T full duplex and been fine. The 4 was that way they had redundancy, so they would bind the 2 on each side. And I'm you don't even need that. Just go. You overspent so much money.
Hey, speaking of XM, can I go on a rant? We combined XM and Sirius a while ago, right?
Yeah.
But so in my previous car was Sirius, right? I've been a subscriber forever. When my previous car was Sirius, when I got the new car, it's XM, and they treated me like it's 2 different companies and it's 2 separate things. Like, and no, that you can't, because normally if you go from Sirius to Sirius and you got 6 months left, they just transfer that subscription to that new vehicle. No, you got to start all over again. I think the word's out that they're one company now, right?
They've been one company. Yeah, well, they're one, company functioning as 2. So it depends on which car you got, right? So this is what a lot of people don't know this. So when XM and Sirius first started, they both were granted an FCC license. Now, according to the FCC license, within 5 years of both being operational, they had to be able to make a combined unit to where then the consumer could choose, if they wanted XM or they wanted Sirius service. So it didn't matter if you went with, JVC, the antenna, it should be able to do both. Well, the problem was they did not design the systems the same way. So you've got Sirius has 3 satellites in the sky and they rotate. Where XM is geosynchronous. One's over New York, one's over LA. And they utilize terrestrial repeaters in order to be able to kick the blind spots. So that's why when you have Sirius, if you're utilizing that service, you would get roaming outages because they don't rely on terrestrial repeaters and they constantly are rotating around. So they had to merge because they couldn't co-develop because the technologies were completely different. And so now they treat them as one company, but in reality, there's two operating models. And they still overpaid for Howard Stern.
That was serious, right? That wasn't XM. Although XM now has Howard Stern, I guess, but I don't listen to any of that.
2001, the summer, when Howard Stern went off the air for a little while, he came out. We were very close to signing him, except we couldn't go live in July, and he had to be live in July. We couldn't get live until September. We weren't ready. But then that's why he re-upped with whatever it was, CBS Radio, whomever, and then 2 years later he signs with Sirius because his contract ended. And XM had already overpaid for like college football, baseball, everything, all those services.
I think at one time, like it was like him, it was Oprah. There was a whole bunch of terrestrial entertainers or public figures that they said, "Hey, we're going to put you there," and they were making millions of dollars. And I was like, I don't see how subscriptions support all that.
Well, so what killed it was essentially the smartphone, because then once you could stream Pandora, cellular network was still more robust than the satellite in terms of get service. So in 2007, when the smartphones craze really started to hit, by 2010, the stock for Sirius basically, at one point they were delisted.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of talked about this before, the ability in this Web 2.0 user content generation model of, I mean, think about what podcasting has done to radio broadcasting.
Right.
You don't need Howard Stern anymore because there's a million of them. I'm not saying anybody's as good.
Joe Rogan.
Right? I'm not saying it.
Prime example of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How many radio programs has he been kicked off? He's like, all right, I'm going to do my own. And he's wildly popular, right?
Yeah. 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 And it's a almost pay on demand, pay as you go model. There's podcasts that I follow that you pay like $1 to get access to the archive of past shows, but it's $1, man. I mean, and thank Apple for setting that microtransaction model with iTunes in the beginning.
But think about the concept that it goes back to like XM, right? You want to get rid of commercials. You want to get rid of people talking between stuff. I want music, I want that content and I want it without all the breaks and I'm willing to pay for it, right? That works with Spotify now. That works with all these things. Like here's the free tier and you're going to have even YouTube. YouTube is always pushing you now. Hey, do you want to do a 3-month without ads? Right. And people are willing to buy their way out of that thing. But whether it's Samsung or anybody else, nobody wants to be in the business of delivering a device of any type, because you're going to monetize and make more money with content.
So I'll bring this back to your storage. So prior to XM radio, the fastest growing technology product at that time, prior to XM, was the DVD player.
Yeah.
XM radio broke that record in the first 90 days of being the fastest growing tech in terms of technology, not the company, the product. Because we sold over 100,000 units in 90 days, but prior to that, it was a DVD player at like 10,000.
Well, and think about how revolutionary, because of the portability and the seamlessness of content access, satellite radio presented. That was a big deal, man. Yeah, to be freed from CDs and tapes. You know what I mean? And now you just had this on demand. You could get crazy channels. Pretty much anything you wanted, there was content for it. And
do you guys have DVD players at your house?
What? No.
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, I know some people that have them in the house because they're a legacy thing. They just haven't thrown it away. But nobody's out there looking for a Blu-ray player or anything like that.
But even if there was something that I would go potentially buy, I mean, I've got my PlayStation or Xbox. I wouldn't go and buy another because they play Blu-ray, they play
right.
So,
everybody.
I don't even buy the games. Everything I do, I just download the content. There's no reason for me.
Right. Everybody used to get purpose-built hardware to watch movies, right? And it's the whole Redbox thing, or which that's still the thing that's in the grocery store, and I see people standing in front of it having them spit a DVD out. I was seeing if the Joker movie. The new Joker movie was on Amazon or Netflix or one of those yet, and you can rent it on there now, right? I mean, why would somebody because I'm 2 days later, I'm in the grocery store and I see somebody standing in front of Redbox punching that button.
The difference between $1 and $5. I mean, that's really what you're talking about,
right? But you got to get out. We've done the one-touch society, right?
Yeah.
So, I saw, speaking of this week in tech, I saw a great statistic this week. 99.9996% of 204 billion miles is how much Tesla drivers drove without incident this year. And everybody wants to complain about that 0.0004.
Right. Yeah.
But then it's always bookended by some knothead who was flossing his teeth at 80 miles an hour going down the highway because of things on autopilot. And I'm like, well, you don't know what goes on in the cockpit when you're flying. Right? I mean, the thing is like, boom. You would hope that's, obviously that's not the thing, but like you make a huge leap of faith with a big flying tube that what goes on behind that locked door is actually fine. Just because it has windows and you can see somebody, what's the difference?
Yeah, right. Exactly. What is the difference? That's the thing. It's such a peculiar idea. Well, and it kind of matches with what we're saying. Think about the transition of, we started with floppies, then we went to optical media, and we went from CD to DVD, and that gave us massive increases in content availability, right? To the point now where not only, I don't know the last time I saw a computer come with an optical drive, let alone a magnetic drive like a floppy. But dude, now we're getting rid of ports too. Like that wasn't enough. We're going to get rid of the ports too, because now there's no need to plug anything in.
And back in TK's day, he was using smoke signal stuff.
Yeah, it was actually an abacus. I heard somebody recently
play tablets with chisels.
I heard somebody recently call it an abacus. I'm like, okay, I don't know where you grew up. All right, at least I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. And so I go back to like what I was thinking about with storage is, so what drives that? Is it consumers saying we don't need this anymore, give us something else, or is it innovation saying here's the next way to do this thing, follow?
I think it's this. Once a technology becomes ubiquitous, people take the reliance that the defense mechanism that they have against total reliance on that, and it goes away. And the internet now is ubiquitous, right? And I've said this probably on the show before, but and I know I say it when I'm out speaking, that kids today have an expectation of connectivity like we had for fresh water when we were kids, right? You expected to go to the faucet and turn it on and it just worked, right? And now what's that going to do once you have, widespread and just ubiquitous deployment of 5G, right? And if you talk about taking away all the ports, it's twofold. One, your reliance on all that, you having storage and everything else has gone away because I can get it. Plus, USB-C right now, what can't that port do? Right? I don't need multiple ports for multiple things. I can do power through it. If I have an adapter, I can use old technology. Everything now, with the exception of the iPhone right now, everything I have is USB-C, and that includes all the Apple devices, right? And I just bought a travel adapter to plug in, and both ports now are USB-C, because even the one last holdout is the Lightning adapter on an iPhone, and that's now I got USB-C to Lightning.
So the interesting part about with 5G to me is that a FiOS or anyone along these lines, I can now basically I have no need for the cable company.
Correct.
Zero.
But that's also why they're out scooping up content companies right now.
Yeah. I can literally, because it's expected that 5G's capabilities is over 100 gigabytes of throughput. That's a theoretical limit. That in its initiation, it's minimum of 50 megabits, and most places will get easily up to a gigabit. So that's.
Do either of you have a 5G enabled phone?
Yes.
Which one is that?
I don't.
I have the LG. I just got.
Now, when you were down in is it available in New York? I don't know what carrier you have, but is it available? Is it available in New York City yet for you?
Yeah. I'm so right where I'm at my apartment. I'm right on the cusp of its the demarcation point. So I get it here, but when I go out further into Long Island, it's not there yet.
Okay.
They just basically it's scheduled over the next 2 years to be throughout the entire portions of Long Island, but I'm close enough to Manhattan where I sit for my phone to be able to get the benefit of it.
But that's the thing that amazes me is I'll look at T-Mobile's coverage map, and it's amazing how quickly they're expanding that. Right? I mean, that's I think that's always been part of T-Mobile's model is, hey, we we went out when we decided, and we bought the high end bandwidth, right? That was our big first purchase, and that allowed us to have speed outdoors, but we didn't have the low end. So we basically were the pioneers of VoLTE on all these phones, because we had to get you, when you were inside, we had to get you on Wi-Fi so you could use the phone, because we couldn't punch through buildings. Then now they've consistently bought the low spectrum to build that pyramid, the base of that pyramid. And at some point, I mean, Apple, AT&T and Verizon thrive on their business and government customers, right? And T-Mo, as a subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom, said, hey, we're going to blast the consumer market. And they're at a price point now where I was talking to somebody on the phone today, like they just got so ticked off at, I think it was one of the two, either AT&T or Verizon's customer service and a whole bunch of other things, and how proud they are of their stuff for what they charge, that they were like, screw it, I'm leaving. And did
the deal with T-Mobile and Sprint go through yet, or is it still?
No, it's still in court in Congress and like that. But
I don't understand this particular aspect. There are so many cellular providers now. It's not just, I mean, we hear about these four, but there are a ton of providers that are, what are the MVNOs that are riding on top of, the four providers. So there's plenty of competition. We just only hear about Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon. That combining T-Mobile and Sprint to me is not a big deal. Now, T-Mobile and AT&T, I could kind of see.
Yeah, because you weren't going to have to reinvent the wheel. You were just going to say, hey, of the 4 channels of GSM, I'm just going to open it, make available the other 2, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would have really locked out GSM for the most part in the United States, because Sprint and Verizon are CDMA. So now combining Sprint and T-Mobile makes a lot of sense to me. So I don't understand why this is still held up in court, other than AT&T and Verizon lobbyists that are
right. Well, there you go. Right. I mean, if you went in, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we use Sprint, and man, I'd be excited to get what ostensibly should be an improvement in service, because Sprint's fucking horrible. They're horrible.
I think, I don't know this. This is my guess, that if T-Mobile's desire to get Sprint is less about any, because they're going to have to pick one, right? Because you're not going to do GSM/CDMA, right? So they're going to have to pick one. So my thought has always been that T-Mobile is grabbing the customer base, and they'll migrate everybody over time to GSM phones. And now most phones come with both radios as a function of, it's easier to produce and cheaper to run them through the line, like every iPhone. Both the radios are in there, and if you buy an unlocked phone, shove whatever cards you want in there. Who cares, right? But with regards to T-Mobile in particular, is they executed a great consumer plan, right? When you talk about the MVNOs, Dan, if you look at, especially with 4G and LTE, where the kind of like their blocks of speed, right? There's LTE, and then there's LTE. There's a high end and a lower end of speed, and usually with the MVNOs. And the MVNOs they're not about access. They're about the big four indemnifying themselves with customers who have a propensity not to pay, right? They don't want to absorb that because it makes their numbers look bad. So they'll give people access via, Cricket, Boost Mobile, and all these others, and say, hey, you can have this. And so when you see on there Simple or whatever it is, you got unlimited. Well, if you get into the thing, you have limited at the low end. It'll say 4G, or it'll say LTE, but instead of being 42 megabits at the top end of that, they'll get you down into the 24 megabits and reserve the top end for the premium customers or the people that can get past a credit check. And it's all part of this. What we started out talking about is, in order to have, it used to be, hey, if you have an education, your society's better. Now, in order to function, to have a job, to keep a job, to get a job, and to be a functioning member of society, you have to have access to the internet, right? And that's always a conundrum for, even right now, like for public schools. And the thing is, to get to make sure that the only access that somebody has, a student, is not their phone, because how hard is that to do homework on just your phone, right? And you're putting up a roadblock, right? And so tethering became thing. And so now the predominance of Chromebooks in public education and throughout the country, that is somewhat to help say, hey, we've got to democratize this. And a lot of that goes into, we recognize there's an issue, but here's how we're going to, shield ourselves financially. And the MVNO is a great solution.
So think about this with the overall, as we start the proliferation of 5G, a country, a continent like Africa, their capability to be able to get their infrastructure, on par with anything in the world, which is going to super, boost their overall education system and access to things. You're going to see a continent like Africa, which is historically, well below the poverty line, that they're going to start that hockey stick curve is going to be tremendous for places like that.
There's a lot of cultural hurdles to that, but I don't disagree with your point. I think the nearest thing, look at Eastern Europe. So
yeah,
when the wall fell down in '89, the entirety of the Eastern European section of the Intel community, we didn't know it was that bad. And my statement, as you might imagine at that time, before I had any filter whatsoever on what I said, was, what the hell have you guys been doing since 1947 if you didn't know it was that bad on the other side of the wall?
Yeah, because you remember before the wall went up.
I do, right? Yeah. Yeah, because I was at Appomattox, and then I was Hey, speaking of that, I saw a great meme the other day. It was a bottle of A1 steak sauce that was established in 1862. And there was a little arrow pointing to the date. And they're like, so you mean to tell me in the middle of the Civil War, somebody had the forethought to go, you know what, I need a bitchin' steak sauce. Yeah. But
yeah. Well, that's how bad the meat was.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if you look,
there was no pollution, then the meat should have been amazing.
If you look at Eastern Europe and say, when they went over there, they said, well, okay, communications isn't this, we can't do all these different things because they've just let those systems lapse, and they were, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years old, right? So I got two choices. One, I can drop in cellular networks, or I can start digging and blasting through the side of these big mountains in Eastern Europe and try to put in another circuit switch network. And then, no, they got helicopters, Siemens and everybody, all the European companies came in there. And so back in the mid to late 90s, in East Europe, once everybody started to become independent countries, they had the most progressive and forward-leaning cellular service. It's now 20 plus years old, and now they're starting to have some of the legacy issues that we dealt with here before everybody started to reform their towers and get into the 21st century, so to speak. Africa's problems are much
blood diamonds.
Well, it's not even that. If you're 20, 30 miles away from water anywhere on the continent, you're good. It's a very high functioning country that effectively the wall to the rest of the country is people turning their backs on it, right? That becomes the barriers. People are like, who cares what happens in the middle of the country? Well, the poor people that live there do. In order to do what you're advocating, Dan, you've got to start with the non-sexy thing of building roads. And I've talked about this before. I will beat the drum of this until the day I die. Here's the bigger problem. There are a number of charities that say, hey, look, we need fresh water in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, in order to do that effectively, you need deep core drilling. And they'll go in there and they'll deep core drill that well. The thing is, the minute they walk off site, when you have a culture that thinks in very short periods of time, respectively in the cycle of the sun, not the calendar, they'll go in and they'll basically steal all the copper and basically disassemble that well to go sell it to be taken care of today, right? That's going to be your bigger problem, right? And we talked about it before. In Africa, a lot of times the West and wanting to help flips Maslow's triangle on its head. And that is the bigger problem with Africa. And even Africans, like if you're talking about South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, all the countries that have wealth largely through either diamonds or petroleum, that's their conundrum, right? And it's for years what has driven the AIDS epidemic on the dark continent, right? And now people are like, okay, we can fix the medical problem, but the problem doesn't exist near the populated areas near the water or near the oceans. It exists in the center of the country where people are, you gave a hungry guy a computer, right? And that's, you were tilts on there, but you're right. It's going to stay that way until people have access to information.
Yep.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was just going to say that giving a poor person a laptop doesn't help them because you can't eat it and you can't use it to kill a goat. Right? I mean, it just has no use in their worldview anymore.
Right. Oh, true.
Not to mention power. I mean,
yeah.
So flipping it to the leadership in tech. I'll take your Tesla aspect. The 99.99996. So in technology, everyone wants to complain about in businesses they complain about IT. Oh, you're too slow. You're too slow. You're too slow. So in 2019, my folks closed just over 10,000 tickets. And going into 2019, we had closed 99.94% of those tickets. And everyone wants to complain about the 187 that are open that require significant work. So inherently, IT is in a reverse model of it being ultra negative. So in order to keep that to keep it status quo, where they say you need 3 positives in order to negate the 1 negative, you already have that being very difficult because the amount of people that complain about IT and not knowing all the things that are in there becomes very difficult to keep the morale of IT up. And so if you want a good organization, you need to be at 5 to 1. Well, I don't want to be good. I want to be great. So I constantly push for myself and my direct reports and the managers. How do we get that to be 10 to 1? Because if we can get it to 10 to 1, then we wind up having people that want to stay longer. They are happier. They're finding motivation in work because it will negate the amount of people that are calling in and just being negative around them. How do we get that ratio to 10 to 1? So that's a big thing I focus on. And I'm really doubling and tripling down on that with my folks this year because the amount of people that are, that are surrounding, there's a lot of change going on at the credit union where I'm at. And with the amount of change means there's that much more problems that can happen that is going to cause a lot of angst amongst the entire user base because they don't know who to blame. It's always typically, oh, well, IT didn't do this, IT didn't do that, not really understanding the ramifications to the morale of IT, but they don't even know that it was IT. So, oh, IT's down again. No, our service provider went down. We have no control over that. I have control just yet over the crappy sonic walls that don't have the capability to be able to automatically flip over to the other circuit, which is why we're implementing SD-WAN. And then my peers, they will spread such same rumors. So I have to have conversations with them and go, hey, how about you stop that? Because if you say it's okay, then everyone else is going to think it's okay. So that's my leadership tip for those that are running technology organizations, or if you happen to be at a company that's has a toxic environment, you've got to figure out how to get that not just 3 to 1, but how do you get it to 10 to 1? Great.
I think right now part of it is what we talked about before. There's an expectation of connectivity, right? And how that manifests itself in the consumer world is demonstrably different than how it manifests itself in the enterprise. The other thing is IT is always an easy punching bag because it's like baggage claim. Yes. Right? When everything works, nobody notices, right? And I always tell people, like, how many times have you gotten off a plane, picked up your baggage because you have an expectation that they put your bag on the plane, right? And walked past baggage claiming, walked in there and gone, hey man, great job getting my bags here today. No, every time somebody walks, think about the psychological damage that, and I use that term lightly, that's done to a person that works in baggage claim. Because everybody, they're immediately defensive the minute anybody comes through the threshold of that office. Because
you're right.
I did it one time because, I things like this amuse me. I walked into baggage claim and there was two ladies standing there. I go, hey, I really want to thank you guys for getting my bag here today on time. It was a great job. And I turned around and walked out and they were all like, because that's not that you broke the paradigm, right? And that, what's the expectation? And I think in some cases, Dan, you're correct in saying, hey, I've got to get it to this level. But there's when you have access to the executive team, when you have access to groups of people, it's like, hey, is reconditioning the user base to say, hey, now everybody wants to, most people have sloped shoulders, so that the minute any kind of responsibility comes to them, they're looking for a way to dissipate that so they don't have to shoulder the load. And that's in your peer group or near peer group, right? That's largely where that happens. Right, because down at the user base, people just like to complain. Right, that's we just say a bitchin' sailor is a happy sailor. Right, yeah. Most people think if something doesn't work, they're going to complain. Why? Because it affects them directly in their ability to get their job done, and negative vibe may come down on them, and they don't want that either.
Right. So there's an important piece to this aspect of that when I'm trying to get to the 10-to-1, it's not just going up to the person saying, "Hey, good job." It's being specific about what they did. And what I would say is almost a positive embarrassment of what people did that were good. So someone comes in, something was down, and they volunteered to take on an additional shift. Hey, you know what? Thanks for stepping up and being a team player and breaking that shift. Because what happens is the people around them also hear it, and then eventually they want to be called out for the positive thing they did. That's the ratio. Find something that the people around you are doing well, and don't just send an email. Look positively and publicly embarrass them, so to speak, of, hey, this is what you did, so other people hear it. It has a tremendous effect on not just that individual, but the people that are hearing it around them.
But why is that important? But why is that specifically where having great specificity about a positive act? Why is that so important?
Because, the biggest part is, and if you just say, hey, good job, it's ambiguous. What did I do that was good? I don't know.
No, but it goes deeper than that, right? The reason that being very specific with positive feedback is because we're always extremely specific about negative feedback.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Right. Correct.
Right. And so you've got to balance that out. Right. And so that becomes and don't wait. Right. Because now you're an employee of the week, the person in the quarter. Well, let's just use a week. Well, if that happened on Tuesday, why am I waiting until Friday to tell everybody you did a good job? Right. Because I want that slope of positivity in that tribe, so to speak. I want that to be as instantaneous as possible. And I want to reinforce good behavior.
See, and that's the thing. There's this weird part about human cognition where, so take the example. I like using kids as an example because, I have a 5-year-old and I think about this shit a lot. So young kids are not very good at figuring out what you mean when you say, hey, don't do that. Because don't is ambiguous. They don't understand what it means. Whereas if you're positive and specific and you say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, they can follow direction, right? And so classic example, don't run in the house. Well, don't run in the house when? And what part of the house? There's all these things that kids can't navigate because they're not cognitively developed, right? To understand context. And shit, most adults aren't either. I don't know what that means, and I just said it.
And that's where parents are frustrated when they can't properly articulate intent.
That's right, exactly. And so it's really hard to be specific when you're giving direction, right? It's not easy.
So that's very true. Think about it. If you're going to have, I have, 2 sons, and if we're going to go have a Nerf gun fight, we're running in the house.
Right. And now, so all of a sudden, you violated this rule, and it creates a lot of ambiguity. The other thing I like about it is I'm a huge believer in what you permit, you promote. So if you let people be negative, you're promoting negativity.
Right.
If you let people be successful and you let them be recognized for it immediately, that's what you're promoting by culture. And shit, man, I'd much rather be around people like that, even if it's cheesy.
Yeah.
I don't care.
So
I'd much rather be around happy people.
Rock stars of the month. And I almost want to kind of go, every month, you should just thank the entire IT department, because without that technology, none of y'all are getting any of this stuff done. So how do you start recognizing some people in IT for actually doing what they're supposed to do, 99.99% of the time in order to keep all of this stuff up. But never once do they want to nominate someone in IT for doing good. It's always, hey, so did this, and they're in HR, or this person's in marketing. And like, none of that stuff happened without the IT folks doing exactly what they're supposed to do every day.
Yeah, just turn it off for an hour and see what goes on.
Yeah.
Right. Here's the mayhem, right? But so to take that one step further, right? You want positive outcomes. You want people to be in a certain, in a certain place, emotionally, mentally, and all the other things that go into getting somebody a positive outcome. You have to be that yourself, right? And that's, as a leader, that's the hard part. I think, especially when you start looking 55 and older, that they're usually C-level folks that grew up in a different time, right? We've talked about this before. I don't raise my kids the way I was raised, because they're not growing up in the same time that I grew up in, right? And you can't do that with employees, but you've got to come in with, hey, I'm not angry, I'm not fearful, I'm at a place of gratitude, and I expect a lot out of myself, and I deliver. And because you can outwardly see that, right? Because I'm on the job and I'm doing what I need to do. Now I can say, hey, I'm the example. And that's when you get certain levels of buy-in, that buy-in becomes greater and greater, because that, the rising tide theory, right? You get people that enjoy the fact that, that they see other people getting positively reinforced, especially, Dan, if you showed up and most all of their feedback was negative, right? Because that's negative is easy. Positive, what do you say? We said, oh, it seems cheesy. Well, why does that seem cheesy? Right? Why is it cheesy to tell somebody they did a good job? If you take it back to children, right? When you're toddlers in particular, when you're trying to reinforce behavior, you want to reinforce it not in the negative all the time. You want to go, hey, great job. Why? Because, and be very specific. Hey, I really appreciate that when company came over, you weren't a maniac running around the house all the time, right? That you were well behaved. And you know what? Most adults are going to look, even if they're not the parent, are going to look at that child and go, man, you were such a well behaved child. And there's some positive energy that's going to go to that kid. And now you're having the tribe reinforce that behavior.
Yep. Because it's
again, by the way, the chairman of the board of the company that I'm at just texted me and said, tell your friend go blue.
Yeah.
He's a two-time Michigan grad.
All about the Michigan gangsters, I'm telling you.
Well, yeah, he lives in Lansing, so I mean he's in proximity.
Yeah.
No, you're totally right, and it should be cheesy. The reason it seems cheesy, I think, to people is somehow we've associated positive reinforcement with positive emotion appropriately, because they're intertwined, and somehow being positively emotional is bad. Like, I don't know where that necessarily comes from, but you know, right? I think as individuals we feel more free to be negatively emotional, like when we're frustrated, being outwardly mad and stuff like that. But somehow the positive side of that is discarded or seemed as taboo. I don't get it.
I think a lot of it comes down to this: is most people negatively approach how they want to be seen, right? Most people negatively approach it in the fact that my job's hard. I want to tell you how hard my day is. And the way that you're going to do that is you have to be negative, right? Because I've got to do this. Oh my God, I've got all this stuff thrown at me. Here's the heavy load I'm carrying every day, right? It's like the old adage. There's two ways to look at things. When you walk into an office, you can say, I'm sorry for being late, right? That's one way to approach it. Or you can walk in and say, everybody, thank you for understanding and waiting for me when I was running a little bit late, right? And there's how does that ownership get how does that emotional ownership get transferred? Be thankful, right? Be in gratitude, even if you made a mistake, even if things. It's like, hey, thank somebody for their understanding, right? Because when you walk in and say you're sorry, in the SEAL community, the correct answer is like, yeah, you are, right? And they mean pitiful, right? They don't mean remorseful, right? Where if you walk in and say, hey, I'm thankful, now you've transferred a positive emotion onto somebody for having to tolerate tardiness, you made a mistake or whatever, right? And it's how you give away positivity. Whereas most people's way to make themselves, to elevate themselves in their mind is through negative comments about how hard they have to work or what they have to do. And it becomes a comparison against everybody else. And now everybody's racing to be, my job's harder than yours. And it doesn't go to try.
Right. I stayed up longer. I slept less. I worked more hours. Exactly. I've had more days off without, I've had more days on without a day off. Shit like that. It's a bizarre culture.
Right.
And I think you're right though, man. It really does have to start with you as an individual and just changing the way that we individually engage with the world.
Right. I totally believe that. And I'll say it till the day I die. If you're fearful and angry, you can't be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why in a part of that, or I have banned for everyone in my organization from saying we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough resources. We're short-staffed. No, this is what we can do with the staff we have.
Right.
If my business partners don't agree, then I'm more than willing to take some of their future headcount to add to my organization. But this is what we can do with what we have. We can collectively determine what the priorities are, but this is what we can do with what we have. Stop saying, I can't do that. I don't have resources. This is what we can do with what we have.
Right.
That's right.
We're not going to kill ourselves to become more, because that kills the morale. I've really pushed my folks to say, outside of normal circumstances, we should not be working with, more than 45 hours a week. It's unhealthy. There is such a degrade in the workmanship when you get past 45, and even of that 45, we're still only getting about 20 hours of productivity out of that 45 in a work week. So going up to 50, you may get a little bit more than 20, but the overall 20, the workmanship is significantly degraded. So
the diminishing returns are high.
But you look at a society, especially in the U.S., we've fostered that culture of, when you start positively, what do we positively look at people? Oh, that guy shows up early, he leaves late, he never leaves for lunch. He probably works 80 hours a week. He's killing it. No, he's not. Right? If I can pay a guy a salary and get him to work 60, 70 hours a week, if you're just straight pipe CFO looking at the spreadsheet, hey, that's pretty good. That's somebody else I don't have to bring in, is the prevailing thought.
And that's not a really good CFO. Then it's back to a controller.
Right. You understand what I'm saying, right? It's that mindset of, what if we train everybody and they leave, and the CEO, a forward-thinking leader says, well, what if we don't and they stay, right? You're talking about a 360 look at the culture and saying, hey, this work is designed for 40 hours a week. If you're not getting it done, I have to start looking at how efficient we are and why, and understanding. I think Google back in the day, they really understood that if you let somebody's thoughts float to something else and you endorse that with their 80-20 rule, when they're focused on what you're asking them to focus on, their efficiency goes way up. Right. And I think that's, and small companies a lot of times can't afford to do that. And there's a bunch of externalities, but that what are you doing to be great? Right. And everybody used to think that was cheesy when I started that Silent Circle. But what it did was put people in a mindset to say it's okay to think about something else outside of work for a while. Right. Because I think at that point in time, and Dan, I think you and I were a lot closer to it, we started to get really efficient with the group of people that were at the office all the time, and those that were participants in kind of the daily grind of what we did. We got really efficient. The reason is we all, at the senior level, fostered that, hey, I want to help you be great. Right? Ultimately that's what
the senior level wanted to do that.
What's that?
Those that were present in the senior leadership.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? But that's, we say present, and we always associate it just with physical being, that you can be in the room and not be there.
Oh, right.
Might not be for people, right? Or you could be 100 miles away and people have a transference of emotion from you when they hear your voice, right? And that's where, what I tell is like, hey, yelling, screaming, that authoritarian leadership style might have worked 40, 50 years ago just because of how folks were raised. That, hey, that's the adult and that's the person that's senior, and we listen to people that are senior to us. Whereas now people are like, hey, I'll bust my behind for you, but I have to know you care. Right? And that's more of a paradigm with, millennials and Gen X, right? And I can work with that because I do care, right? And that authoritarian leadership style, always the wheels come off the cart between 18 and 24 months.
Well, right. It's that authoritarian leadership style. And even when if you are someone that is yelling, it's a short-term fix and long-term failure. Mm-hmm. What winds up occurring is that I might get a short-term problem resolved, but now these people are always going to be in a risk-adverse mode, not wanting to make a mistake, which therefore prohibits them from coming up with creative things to solve future problems that don't exist yet, because they're too focused on, I don't want to be yelled at, and we lose the creativity. They become mindless drones.
Right. When you have to metaphorically get dressed up like a hockey goalie to go in because you're so afraid you're just going to get crap thrown at you, you're like, it's not worth it. I don't need to be innovative, right? Well, I need to defend me.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, because you're getting forced down lower in Maslow's hierarchy. So one of the things I'd like to explore maybe
is a good internet connection.
He is in North Carolina. Boom. Well, it looks like
welcome live.
Now we get the real show.
The adult supervision is completely off the. All right, we're at 56 minutes. How quickly can we shut this thing down?
Hey, I'm back.
We said the adult. We said the adult left the show. Let's go.
Well, I was getting really animated, and I swung my arms up, and I hit the USB-C cable that's tethered to my dock. Oops. What I was going to say was, in a future episode, I'd like to explore this balance between, because I think we've hit on some big topics here that we can explore over the course of 2020. So we have this need and cultural demand for technology to be served quickly and ubiquitously, right? On the other hand, we're saying, well, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with, as a tech culture, slowing down and saying, look, this is what we can do based on what we have, which may not be such that we can deliver ubiquitous on-demand content or service or whatever, right? So there's this really interplay between what I look at as a kind of like a meta abstraction, which is, what's the mission? What are we actually really trying to achieve? And how are our behaviors incrementally getting us there?
In tech, and because you see this all the time, there's a huge disconnect between CISO CIOs and the executive team. Because how many, Dan, that event that I spoke at in Indiana for you was all CISOs and CIOs, right? And I was like, how many of you regularly chat with your CEO about the status and like where you live with security, right? And the conversation, and it's a very malformed conversation. The CEO's like, hey, were we good? Right? In that abstraction about breaches in the state of the network, are we good? CISO CIOs in large portions say yes, because they've been conditioned to do that. The CEO walks away thinking, all right, cool, I'm tight. We're not going to be breached or anything like that. In reality, what that CISO CIO meant was, hey, with the resources I have, but be human capital and anything else, with the known CVEs, all the stuff we're trying to do, I think we're good, right? We're as good as we're going to be, right? And when you say, what framework are you working against? How are you making your maturity model? And I think, Dan, that's one of the things early on at Sound Circle that I really I took hold of when you got there and said, hey, let's really animate the maturity model, right? And I think over time, we're starting to get there, but it's slow, because when you look at, you look at a board member who happens to be an investor and you say, what's your tolerance for risk? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, well, then close the company, right? Because unrealistic views trying to make themselves with resources, if you have an unrealistic outcome expectation and you're trying to mate it with resources, how are those two going to ever get together? Right? My thing to them is like, okay, you invested in this company. You had a risk model that allowed you to say, hey, I'm going to push my cash into the middle of the room because I believe in these guys based on all these risk factors. You have to establish that with security. And I think in large part, because it's a conditioned behavior over years of, cybersecurity and IT was at the back end of the totem pole when it came to what we're going to spend money on, because the appearance was that it wasn't helping us to increase shareholder value, right? And now it definitely can. But I think, Dan, you brought it up before when you talk about the Target hack in particular. It was going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to change all their point of sale systems at once. And they were only taking, they felt that with reputation and everything else they had to do to recover from that breach, it was $25 million max. And they're like, all right, we're going to deal with the $25 million because that's easy. And then we're going to replace those capital systems as they come up in their life cycle expectancy, because it doesn't mess up our financial plan.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing when we talk about, about risk. Many people, when they would read my dissertation or something like that, they're like, oh my gosh, your stuff was on mobile with smartphones. And really it was about how do you evaluate risk in an emerging technology that's going to enter the enterprise for the first time. Right. And that was a framework of being able to how one can go about and do this. And part of that maturity aspect is how much of your senior leadership actually walk away from the computer and lock their workstation, because that tells you how serious your organization really is about security. Do they actually walk away from, okay, I don't care about the phishing tests, because, we actually send out too many emails internally that look like phishing. It's not that the phishing emails look like internal, it's that our internal look like phishing, right? So you have to move that off, your communication officially has to move off to something like Office 365 or G Suite or whatever. But how often is your senior leadership locking their computer when they leave their when they leave their workstation? When they all do that, then you've got a healthy foundation, because they're going to push their people to do it. That's the first thing I look at from a maturity perspective. And is that something that we all hold each other accountable for?
It's leadership by example.
Yep.
Follow me. Don't do what I tell you to do. Do what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you guys know the government now. I mean, with the PIV, with CAP cards and everything else, and hardware, effectively hardware tokens, whether it's YubiKeys or whatever, you kind of remove that, right? Because somebody's got to get up. If they want to get back in the room, they have to have that ID card with them. So you've taken it out. In fact, I got one of the new YubiKey 5 CIs, so I can go between my USB-C and Lightning. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So like there's this cat on LinkedIn, and while I don't agree with everything that he says, his name is Christopher Murphy, and not to be confused with someone I used to work for. Right. So his big point, which I actually agree with, and Jason and I were talking about this in 2010, which has to be someone, because when you were originally talking about how we combine biometrics with authentication, that biometrics isn't the issue, because you still have middleware that can be compromised. But really the key is, can I prove presence?
Right.
And
biological.
Right. Yeah. That PIV, while it's not, there is a bio-identity in there, it's not you, but I have to have that. And I have to physically be there in order to access that. So when I remove that, no one can get into my account. But that's a big thing, is the presence. So, when my peers don't lock their computer and they don't think it's a big deal, then the people that control the ACH system, they're also not going to think it's a big deal.
Right. We used to do that.
Go wrong.
When we first got a network of computing at the last military command I was at, if somebody walked away from their machine and left it unlocked, a heartfelt love letter would be sent to the CO about professing their love, their undying love for him, and everything like that. And it got so bad that the CO finally is like, okay, the point is made. None of you idiots lock your computers because we're inside a secure compound. right? And it got to like literally his inbox on a daily basis because it became the joke was to go, come out to the CEO about how much you love him. But he's like, all right, stop that. The answer wasn't to stop it. The answer was to get a pot. All of those folks were like, man, I don't want to be the guy. Like, don't be that guy, right? And so there was a mechanism of self-control, because it's one thing when you're inside six fences, effectively from the front gate of a base all the way back to where you're working. You're inside six fences. Physical compromise of your machine is amongst friends, right? And that's the best possible outcome you can have.
Well,
no, it wasn't really, because we joke around about it, but again, it's like don't do what I ask you to do what I'm doing, because when you pick up those machines and now you take them out into the world, that's when you really have to be worried about it. Because we weren't worried about any bad actors getting to that room to bang on that computer, right? We needed to create a positive behavior, in the effed up way that we get on each other was to do something like that.
Yeah. Remember, most compromises happen from inside.
Yeah. That's
the only thing the FBI gets correct is their insider threat report.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, that reminds me. The other thing, maybe we'll talk about this next week. Did you see that FBI was going to Apple again to ask for unlocks?
Because they have to do it publicly, because Apple is giving the keys away to all the forensics companies.
You saw my tweet on that, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what they left off publicly is asking.
Yeah.
We have no idea what they asked for in private.
So that was the other thing when you asked about like the Tesla article. Ford has more cash on hand than what Tesla does in sales.
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting how that headline was a little clickbaity and spun, right?
Right.
Like, I'm not diminishing the progress they've made.
No, they've made
phenomenal,
right? But remember, stock valuation and market cap is a perceived value to the market.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Ford has more cash on hand than Tesla does in revenue.
That's still the Mullally effect, right? That's the tale from Mullally when he was the CEO.
Yeah.
I love him. I thought he was a great CEO. I mean, he's like, he was in that same like Jack Welch mold. He shows up in an industry and says, okay, all you idiots are going to go out of business. I'm going to figure out how to defend myself in the best way possible. And he did it.
Think about this. Alan Mullally leaves two of America's icons, and both of them are having significant problems.
Right. But the Boeing problem, when you look at Boeing is a culture problem.
Well, it's of quality control.
Right, but it's that quality. The old joke, they're putting the K back into quality, right? But that, but that is a culture issue, right? You have to demand excellence, right? I mean, I can't remember his name. The Italian guy that ran the Fiat Chrysler Group, he loved going back and forth. He loved because he could run both companies, right? With the time difference, he felt he was very efficient at running both companies. And one of the things that he did when he first showed up, recognizing Chrysler's largest problem was fit and finish, right? Because, we put all our money in the powertrain and everything. Well, yeah, you do, because it's certainly not here. When I go to look at a Dodge truck for the first time and I go to pull out the ashtray and the plastic piece comes off from the front of the ashtray because they didn't adhere it correctly, right? Well, what did he do? He said, we're going to put at the forefront fit and finish and make quality a thing. He moved all of the design executives out of the main building and put them in the design building with all the designers. Got rid of the archaic chief of design and found an up-and-coming 38, 40-year-old and said, hey, go fix my car. Right? And the first thing they did was a Chrysler 300. And there was a great video, I think it might have been 60 Minutes or something, where they had a Chrysler 300 before that process and a Chrysler 300 after. And it was, have you ever seen, and I'm big on these Discovery Channel things and, whatever channels are where they talk about how they're building and automating cars. And you look at the tradesmen, artisans that build Porsches, that build Audis and things like that. And they have these little, polymer fids, for lack of a word, that they go down. And so if you put the hood on, even something that's, a 10th of an inch out or a 32nd of an inch out, you physically don't see it, but your emotion, your mind sees it, and something doesn't look right. And you put your body in conflict and you're like, oh, I can't buy that. I don't care if they got a Hemi engine or whatever, right? They fixed that. and they started to fix their problem because now they were worried about total quality, not just one piece of it.
That's right.
All true. All true.
That's why you got to start by making your bed, getting dressed, looking good.
I wake up looking good.
Some of us.
I can't. When you were kids, were you required to make your bed?
No.
I was. I like literally like one of my parents on the way to the kitchen walked past my bedroom and it wasn't made. That was the start to the day. I mean, it wasn't positive reinforcement. I just didn't want to hear it.
A real problem, and so you had to get rid of them.
What's that? I'm sorry, Dan. What did you say?
Back in your day, bed bugs were a real problem, which is why you had to
They were mites.
I wasn't required to, but I do it now.
Right. I mean, I grew up doing it, and as both of you might be surprised, I'm kind of anal about it. Right. And how I make it. Right. I want things to be tight. I like it. It's more so for the end of the day.
Well, so for me, it's the first thing I'm going to do before I leave the house is accomplish something, even if it's such a simple task as making the bed. It's important.
Right. Admiral Craven's speech to you, his commencement speech at UT about making your bed, right? Yeah. But it's funny because now you hear that thing that's a thing now, right? Make your bed. And unknowingly, I think other than the fact that my parents wanted me to have a clean room, and they felt it started with that one thing that now like I get out of bed and it's like everything, unless I'm going to change the sheets later in the day. But even then I'll pull it up. I do it in hotel rooms. I like kind of tell myself, like I get out of bed and I'll pull all the sheets and everything up and kind of make the bed because it's ingrained in me to do that from the time the mattress probably came up to here on me, right? When I had to, essentially springboard myself into my bed when I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old. Right. And I think that you can create that behavior in business, right? And it's people seeing you doing the right thing, right? Dan, think about at Sound Circle, and I'll tell one last funny story about this. You walk in and we had the kitchen, we had a great setup with snacks and everything like that. And people that would just put their stuff in the sink and then like hope it levitated itself into the dishwasher later that day, right? But then they see senior people cleaning up after themselves, right? And you're like, wait a second, if he's doing it or she's doing it, then I should be doing it. Right. Mm-hmm. I had an old CEO at a company of mine. She's one of my favorite people. Right. I learned a lot from her in leadership about what's important. Right. And then how to find how to keep track of what's important without impeding anybody's day. Right. And to have that positive outlook. Well, up at the headquarters, there was a big open area. We had the 3 founders, their EAs, and there was a big kind of open common area that they enjoyed people walking by because lately, if they were in their office, they could hear kind of the vibe of the company, right? And I think that's hugely important, right? And there was a kitchen that was kind of off that setup that the executives used. And some of the other folks on the other side of the building would always be in there because, shockingly, that had the best snacks, right? And the place was a mess, right? And finally, she posted up on the wall, asking for everyone's help to keep it clean. And then the last sentence was the best. They go, hey, I know I'm making the assumption that all of you have dishwashers at your house, but if you don't know how to use the machine, please let me know and I'll come show you. Right? Because she was seen to be starting the dishwasher quite a bit, right? I mean, people would walk in and see Peggy in there, and if she's starting the dishwasher, I've seen adult men like back out quietly because they didn't want to like, oh man, and she would never get mad. It was never an irate, but it was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic way to say, hey, we're all in this together. Keep your house clean.
Right. Well, and this is why I'll end my part with this. This is actually one of the reasons why I strongly dislike dishwashers. I really don't like it. And I don't like them because for me, mentally, it puts off what can be done immediately and ought to be done immediately. So I'm a big fan of, if I use a bowl, I like to finish with it, wash it, dry it, put it away, done.
Right.
And now I don't have this thing hanging over me because I really, one of the things I hate on this earth more than anything is getting Tupperware with that cold water sitting in the lip out of the damn dishwasher. Man, I hate that. And so I'll just avoid it. I'll just clean the damn thing right now and get it over with.
And you hate cybersecurity as an immune system? I'm just trying to see like where we're at.
Listen, let me tell you something. We had a private conversation how many months ago about immune system, and I've made serious breakthroughs. Watch in 2020, dude. Seriously.
Yeah.
Watch in 2020. Anyway, I hate it more because it's more immediate and it's more real.
So I'll tell you, this is what I use my dishwasher for, right? So I do almost everything that you talk about, except I'm not so sure that I've actually properly cleaned it. So I've already kind of washed everything off. So I make sure it goes to the dishwasher so I know it's properly sanitized. Even though I get
That's how Marsha does it.
I get all the food off, all that kind of jazz, but I'm like, I want to be as sure as I possibly can. So the amount of heat and additional soap in the dishwasher, perfect. But I hear your point. That's why I don't like stuff staying in the sink at all.
Nope.
No. That I finally
one day I'm gonna come to TK's house. I'm gonna sneak in and I'm gonna put a whole bunch of dirty dishes in the sink all over.
Dan's gonna sneak in.
Good luck with that.
Oh my God.
Leave.
Good.
All right, guys.
Good luck with all that.
Wait, they should
in knowing that, Dan, in knowing that I'm going to put the first round in a shotgun be a buck tilt just so it hurts a lot and it doesn't just we're going to turn around.
I'll make sure you're not there. I mean, I tend to know when you're not home.
Make sure you tell me and come pick me up, and dude, I will drive. Because I want to watch. I'm gonna sit in the
no, he's got to wear a GoPro with a helmet, so you're like, and with another one on an arm facing back in his face. Exactly.
All right, gents. Have a great Sunday.
You as well, everyone.
Have a great
week.
Take
care.
Take care.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye.